I'm David Laibson. I'm a professor of economics at Harvard University, and my specialty is behavioral economics. Does the sound okay? Yeah. Hear a little bit of a buzz, but not so bad. Okay, great. So, as a behavioral economist, my interest is in trying to make economics psychologically more realistic. And we're going to talk today about a particular way that I've been doing that in thinking about self-regulation. To motivate our conversation, I want to begin, and by the way, I want it to be a conversation, so I want to encourage people to ask questions. If we're running out of time, I'll let you know, but we're a pretty small group, so we can have a dialogue. Let's begin with I'm going to lower this. I bet you that would help with the, what do you think? So I'm hearing some feedback. Okay, so it's just me that hears it. Okay. So I want to begin with a scenario. Put yourself in the mind of an undergraduate who's being tortured in the following way. They're asked not to have a drink for 3 hours. Then they come to the lab, and we feed them potato chips. And then we give them the following pretty diabolical choice. Would you like one little tiny sip of juice now, or a double sip in 5 minutes? Now, I don't know if you've ever been really thirsty. It's rare, actually, in the worlds that we inhabit. But put yourself in the mindset of that undergraduate subject. What do you think they choose? Do they go for the immediate sip now, or the double sip in 5 minutes? Who thinks they go for the immediate sip now? Who thinks they go for the double sip in 5? Yeah, it's hard to think about it. In fact, the majority go for the immediate sip now. They're so thirsty, they're not willing to wait. Now, we also asked the same subjects a very similar question, but obviously different. We asked them to think about a single sip in 20 minutes and a double sip in 25 minutes. So this is exactly the same choice. A 5-minute wait for an extra sip. But we've moved the whole thing into the future by 20 minutes. What do you think happens? There's some seats in the front. We'll get you all a seat. Don't feel shy to slide down here. What do you think happens now? We've moved the whole thing into the future. Who thinks that they go for the single sip in 20? Right, so now it's 30-70. It's one example I want you to think about. How our decisions change as we move a decision out of the immediate present. What dessert do you want to eat right now at dinner? To a future decision. Do you want to eat dessert next week? Here's another study. The first one was done by me and my collaborators. This one's done by a collaboration team of Reed and Van Leeuwen in Holland. And they were studying workers at a Dutch firm, and they asked the workers to choose a snack to be consumed in a week's time. Not today, in a week's time. What do you want in a week's time? Something healthy like fruit, or something not so healthy like chocolate? What do you think these Dutch workers choose? Fruit, yeah, exactly. So, vast majority choose fruit. Then the researchers come back a week later and say, we've returned. No one should be standing. There's plenty of seats. Come on, okay. Exit option. We've returned in a week's time, and we brought our snacks, the snacks that you chose last time, but we didn't bring the list of names. So we don't know what you chose. You've got to choose again. And now the snack is to be delivered instantly, on the spot, immediately. What do you think the Dutch workers choose now that the snack is going to be instantly consumed? Chocolate, exactly. Good, you guys got it. I mean, we're all human, so this is familiar stuff. I want to talk about a framework that organizes all of these facts and many other facts that we'll come to in the course of this conversation. It's called present bias. It's an economic model. I'll strip out all the Greek letters and talk about the fundamental ingredients. The basic idea is that we psychologically put full psychological weight on stuff that happens to us right now. And we put half psychological weight on stuff that happens in the future, even a day or two away in time. Let's see the consequence of this model for behavior that I think many of us struggle with, certainly me.
What do you mean by psychological weight?
It's a good question. So if you think about costs and benefits that come at different points in time, I got to kind of add them up to make decisions. And I've got to put a weight on the costs and benefits that come in the future and the costs and benefits that come now. And I've got to kind of add them all up and ask, do I want to buy that car or marry that person, or have a fourth child, or etc. So I've got to add these things up. How do I add up things that are going to hit me in the future? Well, the theory is they only get half weight. So here's an example. Now I'm going to kind of walk you through a little bit of math, but it really draws out the intuition of this framework. Suppose that we're thinking about exercise, which has an immediate cost. I personally do not like to exercise. I'm not one of those exercise guys that really loves it. It's unpleasant. But, okay, I'm not the only one. But everyone tells me, my physician, my spouse, everyone, I should exercise. It's good for me. It's good for my health. So there's some delayed benefit that presumably swamps the immediate cost. Let's think the delayed benefit is 8. The immediate cost is 6. The problem is that the immediate cost is immediate. Hit me right now. Gets full psychological weight if I'm going to go to the gym and exercise. But the benefit is coming in the future. Here's that 8. And it's getting discounted, downweighted by this factor of a half. So the model says that if I'm thinking about exercising today, net benefit -2. No, thank you. That's a good prediction of my behavior. But the model makes another prediction. What if you ask me today, Thursday, about my desire, my plan to exercise tomorrow, Friday? Well, if I'm thinking today about exercising tomorrow, is there any immediate cost? No. I'm asking tomorrow's self to pay the price. So in this scenario, there's a delayed cost of 6, an even more delayed cost of 8, a weighting factor of a half because everything's happening in the future, net payoff +1. This sounds like me. I'm not going to exercise today, but today I'm going to plan to exercise tomorrow. Now, how often will I exercise if this model is right? How often will I be planning to exercise? Every day except today. Yeah, exactly. You guys get it. So, if you were at the previous talk that I just gave 20 minutes ago, you heard this example. My wife took me to a gym a few years ago. We both joined. We gave them $1,000 each. And I thought at that moment that I was going to exercise twice a week, every week for the next year, because exercising tomorrow is a really good idea. And over the next year, I really shocked myself. I went 5 times at a cost of $200 per exercise event. And the logic of this model for me was very much at play. Now, I'm just one data point, and you should be very wary of anecdotes. They're entertaining, they're memorable, but we need to look at data. Here's data that Stefano Della Vigna and Enrico Malmandier collected in the Boston area. In the Boston area, they found that people were paying $75 per month. There are several chairs that people should be encouraged to take. There's these Lucite chairs here, which are very uncomfortable, but better than standing. And there's one over here. Please, there's empty chairs there. No one should feel shy about crawling over other attendees. That's perfectly okay. At least that's what I say. So they found that people were paying $75 per month to be members of these gyms. They found that because they had swipe card data, that people were going 4 times per month, and they were paying effectively, implicitly, $19 per visit. But what made the study really interesting was that you didn't need to be a gym member to go to these gyms. You could simply pay on a per visit basis. And what do you think the cost of a per visit was? $10 per visit. And here we see the real tension. I mean, the gap between what people probably thought they were going to do, which is go at least 8 times per month. I mean, that's not a big hurdle. But the reality is life got in the way, instant gratification got in the way, our propensity to postpone the hard work got in the way, and the exercise that they actually delivered was a lot less than what they expected. Now, there's a lot of things we're planning to do tomorrow, and I could show you study after study of our propensity to procrastinate. So we're going to have to just, believe me when I say, whether it's investing in financial capital, we're planning to cut our credit card debt, refinance our mortgage, join the 401k plan, raise our 401k savings rate, or whether it's investing in human capital. I really do want to take my college courses seriously. Do you remember college? Do you remember, for me, every single semester swearing this semester would be different? And every single semester finding, yet again, the finals have arrived and I've done none of the required reading. And it was a fundamental disappointment to me that I was wasting my college years. The investments that I was planning to make, somehow, it was never the right time. We plan to invest in social capital, and we underdeliver. We plan to invest in health capital, plans for exercise, plans for better eating, plans for quitting smoking. Most smokers have tried to quit many, many times, and they keep trying. Plans to quit substance abuse. Now, we know more and more about the neural foundations of these internal tensions, of the battle between our different perspectives, the long view and the short view. We know that there's a region in the brain called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, DLPFC, highlighted here in blue, near the surface of the brain, up here in the cortex, that seems to be activated whenever we're engaged in some kind of self-regulatory task. When you have to resist that temptation, get to work, don't eat the chocolate, do eat the fruit, that region seems to robustly activate. It doesn't mean that all of your self-regulation lives right there. It does mean that we're learning something about the architecture of these mechanisms. There's another region here in orange and red, yellow, that's deeper in the midbrain, the dopamine reward system, which seems to be more prone to communicate the desire for the immediate reward, the instant gratification. Now, the activation of these brain regions also predicts behavior, as you might expect. When the self-regulation region is relatively active and the reward region is relatively less active, then people tend to be more patient and say, I'll wait for the delayed reward that's larger. But when we see the opposite pattern, when the executive function self-control region is less active and when the reward region is more active, that's when people are saying, darn it, no, I'll just go for the immediate reward, to hell with the future. Now, we're also learning a bit about the underlying genetics of all of this. And I want to just warn you that even as we begin to unravel the neural mechanisms and as we begin to unravel the genetics, there is no gene for any of these things. It looks as if there are thousands of genes that jointly regulate these propensities. So that don't think that there's a gene for being a good self-regulator or a gene for being patient or a gene for being educationally prone or a gene for being smart. Individual genes explain a tiny fraction of the variance in the cross-section of behavior. Only 0.02% is explained by the most predictive powerful genes, or individual single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are base pair variants in the population. Now, I want to take all this to behavior change, to a conversation about how all this matters for human behavior and what we can do to utilize these ideas to help make the world a better place. I want to talk about savings behavior and see these ideas in action. We have a savings problem in this country, and you'll see some of that data in a second. The problem is not that people don't recognize the problem. If you ask American employees, about 2 out of 3 say that they're not saving enough for retirement. Again, I advertised these Lucite chairs are awaiting a customer. 2 out of 3 say that they're not saving enough for retirement. 24 out of 100 say that they're going to fix the problem of undersaving for them in the next 2 months. But we have their administrative records. We know exactly what they've done over the next span of time. This is joint work with James Choi and Bridget Majorian and Andrew Metrick. And we followed up and got those records from their employer. How many of these 24 actually do raise their savings rate? And we'll give them a double time. Not 2 months, we'll give them 4 months before we'll check, just in case they were a little bit slow. Yeah, good answers. 3. So by and large, Americans know that they're not saving enough. About half the population isn't saving enough, and 2 out of 3 think they're not saving enough. So the issue is not awareness or information or education. The issue is a failure to actually make the change. Now, we've got lots of ways of solving this problem, and here I'm going to repeat something that you might have heard from me in the previous session. I apologize if you heard about automatic enrollment. Let me quickly review for everyone else. So the old way of getting people to enroll in a savings scheme was to tell them, look, you're not enrolled. We're going to start you there as a new employee, as a non-enrolled member of our 401k plan. we have this terrific thing, the 401k plan. We encourage you to enroll. There's a match. There are tax benefits. You need to save for retirement. And all that you have to do to enroll is make a phone call. It's a lousy 15-minute process. Surely that couldn't get in the way of saving for the last 30 years of your life. Really, tell me, that 15-minute hurdle couldn't possibly matter. That was the way we did it. The new way is to flip things, to take where we really want people to be, a participant in the savings plan, and move that to the starting point. And now, if they want to opt out, they can, but now their procrastination is serving the cause of saving. The procrastinators are held in, and in fact, most people want to save anyway, so this is the new world. And there's another way that we do it, and I also referenced this in the previous talk. Suppose you're a hardcore libertarian and you don't like the idea of nudging people into saving, unbalancing the playing field by making saving the default. Suppose you wanted to balance things and not push people in either direction. You didn't want to create an unfair advantage to savings or non-savings. What could you do? Yeah?
Make them opt one way or the other.
Make them choose, exactly. Active choice. Take both options and require that people express their preference. You're an American, gosh darn it. Make a choice. That's the American way. Express your preferences. So active choice is the idea, and we'll see another example of this later, of requiring that people express their preferences, not creating a passive option where if they do nothing, something happens. In this case, doing nothing is not an option. Now, what else could you do? If that 15-minute hurdle turns out to be playing a big role in stopping people from enrolling in a 401k plan, we can basically shrink that hurdle away. So we take a 15-minute enrollment process and we turn it into a 15-second enrollment process. You want to get people to do things? You think a 15-minute enrollment matters? It shouldn't matter? Well, you're wrong. A 15-minute enrollment process makes a big difference. So shrink it down, get rid of it by taking that complex form and making it a very simple form. Take a look at the data. So when we tell American workers, you're free to opt in, only 40% enroll in the first year of employment. When we tell them, here's a quick way to enroll, check a box and you can enroll, 15-second enrollment process, we get a 10 percentage point kick. And in fact, we get that kick every time we mail them the simple form. If we tell them, you must choose, it is your obligation to make a decision for yourself, we get 70% enrollment. And if we tell them, you're already enrolled, opt out if you don't like it, we get 90% enrollment. Now, in principle, it shouldn't matter, should it? I mean, this is one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in your life, how much you're going to save for retirement. And yet, the choice architecture makes an enormous difference in the outcomes that we see. And this is why a traditional economic perspective could really lead you astray. If you think look, the details shouldn't make a difference, people are going to rationally make the right decision, well, the answer is the details make all the difference. Now, let's think about the modern retirement savings system and think about whether it's working. The system has $11 trillion in balances right now, the US retirement savings system. That's 401ks, 403bs, 457s. That doesn't even account the shrinking defined benefit pension plans. These are just the 401k style accounts. Now, what would a typical life cycle look like for an American getting ready for retirement? They're going to have a 6.5% guaranteed rate of return in this simulation, just to keep things simple. A 2% inflation rate. That's the way it's been historically in the last decade. We're going to assume a 6% 401k savings rate. We're going to assume 100% employer match. No leakage from the account, so the money that goes into the account stays there all the way till retirement. We're going to assume that you start working at age 22. Your first job, you get paid 35 grand. A little bit generous. Typical American probably starts work at a lower wage. We assume you start saving when you first get employed. We assume 1% real wage growth, and then a 50% Social Security replacement rate. So the government, if you do nothing, the government's going to replace half of your income when you retire. And we'll assume a 4% decumulation rule in retirement. So what do you think? If a household did that, is that going to be enough?
No.
Who says yes? Who says no?
Yes.
Who doesn't know? So the answer is it is enough. It's more than enough. It's terrific. If the system worked that way, And that's not a fantasy. I mean, that's plausible. At retirement, you would replace 103% of your income, and you'd have $719,000 of assets, which for this household is plenty. And you'd have your house, and you'd have Social Security. And that's inflation adjusted, so that's $719,000 in 2013 dollars. So terrific, that looks pretty good. But I'm sure a lot of you are sitting there thinking, yeah, I see heads. So why is your head shaking back and forth? No.
Start saving at 22.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and a 2% inflation rate.
Right, yeah, there's a
6.5 guaranteed return.
these are terrible assumptions. Yeah, we hate these assumptions. Who made these assumptions? Okay, fine. Let's fix them. Let's fix these assumptions. Let's see if we can do better. So there's the original scenario with 103% replacement ratio and $719,000 of accumulation. Let's first acknowledge there's a lot of leakage from these accounts. For every $2 that goes in, $1 comes out. That's on the flow basis. On a balance basis, about 3.5% of the balances leak out of these accounts every year on average. If you just take account of that before retirement, if you just take account of that, the replacement ratio goes from 100% to 70%, and the accumulation falls in half. Remember, Social Security is there accounting for half of the replacement. That's why this can fall much more quickly than this falls. Well, a lot of households don't have access. About 2 in 5 households don't even have a 401k at work, and they're saving a lot less than the households that do have access. The match rate is typically not a dollar for dollar, it's 50 cents on the dollar. Your employer typically matches 50 cents on the dollar. We assumed a 6.5% guaranteed rate of return. We'd all love that. Let's assume a 5.5% risk-adjusted guaranteed rate of return. What about those who do have access, who don't participate in the retirement savings system? A lot of people are still non-participants. People don't start saving at 22, they start saving at 30. Social Security is going to be less generous. That's going away. That's going away in a small degree. It's not outrageously underfunded. It's a little underfunded. And when they fix the system, the generosity will fall a little bit. So my simulation says that the replacement ratio for this household is 51%, meaning when you hit retirement, it's as if your income fell in half. And your assets at retirement for this household, $87,000. That's it. That's, by the way, your 401k, your IRA, your stocks, your bonds, your checking account, your CDs, everything, every financial asset, $87,000. That scares me. That's a scary number. Do you think American households are retiring with a number like that?
If you just stop the leakage, you got most of the money back.
Yeah, just stop the leakage. You make a huge difference. Absolutely. Well, let's compare this number in the simulation to the actual median financial wealth of recently retired U.S. households. $68,000. That's 2007. It went down, and then it came back up. That's before the financial crisis. Think about that. You retire. You're done with work. And this is including 2-person households. You retire with $68,000 to your name. That's it. And your Social Security check. Now, I want to make it scarier for us. You've got to pay medical costs in retirement. Medicare doesn't cover all of your costs. You've still got to pay premia. You've got out-of-pocket costs in Medicare. You've got long-term care costs if you end up in a nursing home. Just the premiums, the Medigap insurance, and the co-payments for Medicare, not even counting long-term care insurance, that's $240,000 for a typical 2-person household retiring today. They're going to end up using their Social Security to pay most of that. Okay, so who's depressed? Yeah, I'm depressed too. Now, I want to think about some of the ways we're going to solve these problems. Now, one of the ways we're going to solve these problems is by making the defaults in our system a lot more aggressive. Right now, the default enrollment savings rate in a 401k is typically 3%. We should make the default enrollment savings rate 10%. That would go a long way to addressing these issues. But we've also got this leakage issue. And now I want to both address the leakage issue and also give you some insights about some kind of bizarre psychology that arises in the kinds of frameworks that we've been talking about. So Go back to our exercise example. I plan to exercise in the future, but we know what the model says is going to happen. I'm going to get to the future and then change my mind. And that's going to happen again and again and again. So can you give me a suggestion? How am I going to actually succeed in exercising? If I want to exercise today, but I won't want to exercise on Saturday when the moment of action arises, what's your recommended strategy for actually getting me onto the tennis court Saturday morning, or getting me to, burn some calories Saturday morning? Yes?
Make an appointment with a trainer.
Exactly. Or with a fellow tennis player. I mean, anyone who will be there so that I have to be there. So we commit ourselves. And the people who successfully exercise, a lot of them tell that story. It's the trainer who yells at me. It's the exercise partner who's going to be furious at me if I don't show up at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning because he's there. Well, we're willing to commit ourselves. We're willing to bind ourselves to the mast when it comes to exercise. What about savings? I mean, why do we have a 401k system that allows all that leakage? A 401k system in which you can take money out of the system and you basically either pay no penalty or a minuscule penalty of 10% for all of these early withdrawals. Well, let's think about how people might react to a world in which they actually were given the opportunity to bind themselves to the mast. I want you to think about yourself first, and we'll then talk about what others might do. Here's an example, and we're going to...
In the world, you don't have a choice.
Sorry?
In many places in the world, you don't have a choice.
In many places, you don't have a choice, but I want to kind of ask the radical question. What if you did have a choice? That's what we're going to look at right now. Think about the following experiment. This is joint work with John Bashairs, James Choi, Bridget Madrian, and Jung Suk Kung. We gave subjects a representative sample of US adults a crazy choice. We gave them $500 real to keep, real money. And we asked them to divide that money across two accounts. A freedom account with a 22% rate of interest, made it high so that this would be more appealing than paying off their credit card. And a goal account with a 22% rate of interest. Same exact rates of interest. But the goal account has a withdrawal restriction. You set your own goal date. Before the goal date, you pay a 10% penalty for early withdrawals, just like an IRA or 401k. And after the goal date, you can have your money with absolutely no restriction. So first let me ask, what goal date would you pick? If I forced you into the goal account, what goal date would you pick? Today. Okay, today. That's a good answer. That's a way of getting out of the goal account. Anyone? Well, actually, okay. That's a good. Let's run with that. So it sounds like that gentleman, hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, doesn't want to be restricted. Let's figure out the tenor in the room, and then I'll tell you how other people, just like you, vote in a situation like this. You're not representative people from the U.S. We'll contrast your behavior with the behavior that we see here. So imagine that I didn't let you pick a goal date that was just a few days away so that you could basically eliminate the effectiveness of the account. Imagine you were going to really use the goal date and really use the goal account. Would you put any money in that goal account, or would you put all of your money in this experiment as a subject into the freedom account? Who would put at least $1 into the goal account? Raise your hand. Okay, surprising.
All my money.
Okay, all your money. Okay. So,
2%?
well, no, but the freedom account also has a 22% rate of interest.
Yeah, but there is a leakage.
Okay, good. So you guys surprise me. Usually when I talk to economists and financial professionals, which I thought of as roughly like you, they don't want any part of the goal account. The goal account seems absolutely crazy, wild. Who would ever voluntarily restrict their choices? Choice is good. Freedom is good. This is restrictive. Who wants it? They want everything here. In fact, in a representative sample of US adults, they look a lot like you. About 80% of them put at least some of their money in the goal account. Now, since they, on average, put about half their money in the goal account, meaning when you use the goal account, you don't put all your money there, you put half of your money there, and since about 80% of them use the goal account, the total number, the total dollar-weighted allocation to the goal account is about 35% of the dollars in the study. So about a third of the dollars in the study end up locked away in the goal account. And no one does what the gentleman back there suggested. They all pick goal dates that are far off in the future. No one picks goal dates that are in the near present. Yes?
Well, one of the things that bothered me about all this since I was a kid,
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you. Sir.
I don't trust the government. No, because, look, Social Security gets a rate from the government far less than even Treasury does.
Yeah.
So I can't trust what the value of that money is going to be in the gold age.
Yeah. Well, I want to just pause right there. For the moment, I want to leave the government out of this. The people that are on the other side of this are an academic team regulated by an institutional review board. So this is not you depositing money with the government. This is you in an experiment with Harvard University researchers making a decision about how to allocate your funds. We can talk later, and I hope we will, about what role the government might play in the future or not regarding accounts like this. But for now, we're not talking about the government. And I agree with you. The government is in many ways not trustable. So we have an interesting tension when it comes to policy, but we're not there yet. Yes?
Suppose you have a number of goals, the first question would be, you have a choice at the end of, say, 5 years, and then another choice at the end of 10 years, and another choice at the end of 12 years.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference?
Absolutely. So you could easily imagine a world where you had multiple goal accounts with different dates attached to them. But before we dig into this, I want to just show you the rest of the data on this slide, and then I'm going to take more questions. So that was the first study that we did. We gave the subjects the choice between two accounts, a goal account and a freedom account, and about a third of the money ends up in the goal account. Here's the second study that we did with the same population of subjects, but different people pulled from the same pool. So these subjects have not seen the first question. We give them a choice between a goal account with a 20% penalty, a higher penalty for early withdrawal, and a freedom account. Does this second group put more in the goal account or less in the goal account, or the same? Let's all vote. So who says less? Hands up. Who says the same? Hands up. Who says more? Hands up. Okay, so more is not very popular, and yet goes up. Now, the logic that you guys all had at the beginning would kind of make one wonder whether up was a pretty credible thing to expect here. If people are looking to tie their hands, well, what ties your hands better than a bigger penalty for early withdrawal? Now here's another study that we did with subjects drawn from the same population, but different subjects. We gave them another choice, a goal account with absolutely no withdrawal penalty, or a freedom account with again, full flexibility. Withdraw anytime you'd like. Let's do it again. Who thinks that this drives the allocation down? Now, you can't have the money before the goal date. It's perfectly inflexible, perfectly illiquid.
So
Who
it's
thinks
saying they cannot take the money out.
they cannot take the money out before the goal date? I'm sorry. After the goal date? Yeah, so yeah. If you can't have the money, that's not very appealing. Before the goal date, no access. You can't have the money, no ability. I don't care what crisis you're having personally. The money is out of bounds. After the goal date, you take it out willy-nilly, just like the freedom account. So now we have, in essence, an infinite penalty. You can't have the money before the goal date. You can't even have a penny. So does this kind of radical inflexibility, radical penalty, increase the allocation, decrease the allocation, leaves it the same? So who thinks that this makes the goal account less popular than no withdrawal restriction? Who thinks it makes the goal account no more or less popular? Same as 43. Who thinks it makes it more popular? Yeah, exactly. So now 56% of the money ends up in the goal account. Now, we found this so strange that we replicated it and got the same result on yet another population of subjects. And we ran another study that was closely related. We thought, well, what if we gave people 3 accounts? Not as we did here. It's always this or this, this or this, this or this. It was always a 2-choice experiment. Now it's a 3-choice experiment. Allocate the money to a freedom account, to a goal account with a 10% penalty, or to a goal account with a no withdrawal restriction. Any way you want, any mix, allocate it across the 3 accounts. And now we find half the money goes to the freedom account, about 1/6 of the money goes to the 10% penalty account, and about 1/3 of the money goes to the no withdrawal account. So even in a head-to-head contest, the no withdrawal account is twice as popular as the 10% penalty account.
Where'd you get the people for this thing?
So yeah. So they're actually, it's unlike most of the work that I do. These are not undergraduates. These are not even weird adults. This is a sample that is a representative sample of all US adults that is run out of RAND. It's called the American Life Panel. And anyone can run an experiment on that panel if you pay the American Life Panel for access. RAND is a nonprofit organization that basically does research like a university, but they don't have students. Yes?
It just seems to me that there's one variable missing. In today's world where portfolio turnover in mutual funds runs between 50 and 400%, but most of it between 50 and 125% per year, and where technology's life cycle is 12 months or less, if you did the no withdrawal account, that you said that the person who held that account could go in and reallocate assets, then it seems to me that would be more desirable and even much more choice.
Well, you're kind to say that there's only one thing missing. There's a lot of things missing from this experiment. That's just one of them. And you're right. If I were actually creating this for the real world, I would give people the ability to asset reallocate because some people want that, and that would make the illiquid accounts more appealing if they knew that they had some control over them in real time. Yeah. Now, I want to ask a policy question. There's so many ways in which this experiment is ill-suited to, actually designing US pensions policy. But it gets us thinking. We've got 300 flavors of ice cream, and we've got only one flavor of retirement account. Ice cream is less important than retirement accounts. And yet, everyone in America has to deal with the same monopoly account that was built by the US government that, in essence, is a 10% one-size-fits-all rule. Well, maybe some people want a little more self-control in the form of money they can't get their hands on. I remember, suddenly it came to me, a taxi cab ride I took years ago in Chicago where the taxi cab driver kept telling me that every time he got a big fare, he'd rush to the bank to get rid of the money so that it wasn't in his pocket, burning a hole in his pocket to spend. Same idea here. Disgorge the money, and in this case, put it in a very safe place. Can we do better? Can we give people the option, the choice, to have an account that's more like a defined benefit pension where they lock away the funds? Now, I want to show you that these same ideas translate to the health domain as well. So we can talk about the same kinds of psychological mechanisms in the domain of health and also make progress there. So there's a lot of similarities. Society and individuals have very aligned goals when it comes to health. We want to make people healthier and cut costs out of the system. We want behavior change. We want to improve our diet. We want to exercise. We want to adhere to our meds. We want to visit our primary care physician. And yet, we don't. We Americans are terrible in all these different areas. And I think people the world over are prone to not live up to their own intentions vis-a-vis healthcare. So how do we align intentions and actions? Here's an example. This is a flu shot study. We're trying to get people to take their flu shot. People, by and large, want to take their flu shot, but a minority of Americans actually do so. What can we do very cost effectively to improve those outcomes? So here's a typical flu shot form. We show people the times that are available to take your flu shot, and we urge them to come to one of those free clinics and get their shot. That's the control condition. We randomly put people in another condition too. We'll call this the date plan condition, where we show people the times, but we also ask them to express an intention for action. So what's called in psychology an implementation intention. How are you going to do it? Write it down, not for me, not for the healthcare provider, for yourself. Express to yourself your plan of action. Write down the day of the week, the month, and the day. And then keep it. Don't send it out. That's the date plan condition. Here's the date time plan condition. Again, we show them the times where the flu clinic is open, but we also ask them to write down the day of the week they're going to go, the month, the day, and the exact time they intend to go. No real commitment here, but a plan of action. Here's the data. In the control condition, when they just get the flu shot letter, 33% of the subjects actually get a flu shot, only a third. Free clinic, nevertheless, only a third get it. When we add a few drops of ink and tell people to make a plan, we drive that up to 34.6%. We add a few more drops of ink and we tell them to make a plan with an actual time of day, 37.2% go get their flu shot. Now these are modest differences, 33 to 37.2, not night and day changes as we saw in the 401k realm. But think how easy this is. The flu shot provider here is changing the tiniest element on their form, on their mailing. Costless. They're mailing it anyway. And they're getting a pretty big movement given the fraction of people who were there to begin with, from 33 to 37.2. So here's an example of how we align people's good intentions with their action actually getting a flu shot. Now here's another study using active choice. This is a study that I referred to up at the Jerome Hotel. Who was at the Jerome Hotel a little while ago? Okay, so very few of you, so I'll review this so everyone else catches up. So there's something called home delivery of your meds. You don't need to have your meds picked up at the pharmacy every 30 days. You can have them mailed to your house, 90-day refill. It costs about 30% less per pill to have them mailed to your house. You don't have the hassle of having to pick it up. Turns out the error rates are lower when they're mailed to your house. They're low in the pharmacy, and they're even lower still when you have them mailed to the house in terms of the errors when the factories basically fill the pill bottles. So pretty appealing. You save a third of the money that you're spending. You save all the aggravation of going to the store. And yet there are some downsides. Maybe you like your pharmacist and want to talk with him or her. Maybe you have a spouse who doesn't know that you're taking that medicine that's a little bit embarrassing, whatever it is. Maybe you live in a place where your front stoop is not safe, and if there's a box wrapped in brown paper on your front stoop, it's going to get stolen. So not everyone should have home delivery, even though it's cheaper, it's easier, it's safer. So what we did, Express Scripts came to us and said, what can we do to get people to use home delivery? It's win-win. It's win for the pharmacy benefit manager, Express Scripts. It's win for so many people using this lower cost channel. We did active choice. And when we forced people to choose, about half of them said they wanted home delivery. So when you force people to choose, half of them said home delivery sounds like a good idea. But before they did active choice, they had simply been mailing people an opt-in form where they said, look, if you want this, enroll. And the enrollment rates were absolutely abysmal. So with active choice, we drove the usage of home delivery up from 6% of all fills to 18% of all fills. Now you might wonder, why is it 18 and not 50%? Because most prescriptions are not appropriate for home delivery. So if it's certain kinds of biologicals or certain kinds of acute medication, home delivery is not appropriate. So among the medicine that was appropriate for home delivery, we ended up with half of that medicine now being delivered to the home. At this one company where we tried this, we saved $1.2 million in the first year, and this is just the savings to the company that it was tried. There's additional profit that goes to the pharmacy benefit manager that we don't know how to measure. So the company that employed these workers saved $300,000, and the members themselves saved $800,000 for $1.2 million in savings, and now this is rolled out at hundreds of companies, and first approximation, this is generating about 100 million, just this silly little idea of forcing people to make a choice instead of letting them opt in is saving the US economy at least $100 million a year, every year, for as far as we can see. So, we started with the question, can we control ourselves? The answer is it's really hard. We have warring selves. We have a long-run self that looks ahead in time and says, do the right thing. Be great with your kids, be a good boss, meet your deadlines, exercise, eat right, focus on the important stuff, don't spend so many hours watching YouTube videos, go to bed on time, turn off the late night television, only have 3 scotches a week, not 12, quit smoking cigarettes. I mean, you know, we've all got our things. I mean, I guess, you know, for me it's lack of exercise and too many Big Macs. And probably misallocation at work too. So the long run view says do the right thing. But in the moment, right now, what am I going to do? I'm not going to exercise. I'm not going to deal with that really important work thing. I'm going to surf the web. I'm going to look at CNN Finance. I'm going to do all the things that are momentarily relaxing and ultimately self-defeating. So how do we empower the long run view? How do we empower the self that I think is the self I want to be, the self that does the right thing in the long run and resist the temptation in the short run to pursue instant gratification? And I've given you some examples. It's about changing the environment, creating tricks that make the long run self more powerful, like a default that puts me in the savings plan to begin with. So now the short run self has to opt out, which is costly and time consuming, and I don't want to do that anyway, to get out of the savings plan. Or active choice. Stop procrastinating about making a decision about using home delivery. Force the pharmacy benefit manager forces me to confront the decision and the procrastination ends. Or making things simple so that I get people to actually do what I want them to do because the enrollment form isn't a barrier in and of itself. If the enrollment form is a 30-minute barrier, it stops the good behavior, even if the good behavior is worth tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. That 30-minute enrollment process is actually a meaningful hurdle to $100,000 of savings. Or asking people to express their intentions, to write down what they plan to do, to make it concrete, at least to themselves, if not to others. And then the final, I think most exciting angle is the idea of restraining ourselves, of binding ourselves to the mast, as Ulysses did, of tying ourselves to the plans, to the goals, to the actions that we intend to pursue by limiting our choices in the future. Now, we don't have a lot of that in our society right now. Often it's the government doing it for us. It's the government dictating to us what that rule will be and saying you can't have access to your Social Security money. But there are other ways to do it where we make the choice, where we decide how we want to be bound to the mast. And I think we need to consider all the many permutations that are possible in limiting our actions and thereby obtaining the goals that we're setting for ourselves. So we've got 12 minutes. I encourage questions, and we'll go until 2:20. Yes?
Seems like the advent of digital technology being used for education has just amazing potential, but it introduces massive issues in this behavioral area. In other words, you could theoretically get a PhD online sitting out in the middle of nowhere, but you have to have this self-restraint to get there. Have you been involved at all in trying to figure out those types of issues?
So very much so. I'm actually working on a textbook, and I'm part of the Harvard edX program, and I'm working on a MOOC right now, in fact. I actually want to flip that on you. Think about the modern classroom. Let me explain why the modern classroom is dysfunctional and why the electronic classroom is going to be better. I know it's counterintuitive. Here's the modern classroom, where I live every day. I give my students an assignment, and I don't know whether they've done it or not, because I have no way of electronically observing whether they're accessing the textbook or not. So the readings, who knows if they're doing it? Who knows how they're doing it? Then I give them an actual problem set. Well, they finally pass it in 2 weeks after I gave it to them. And then I give it to my teaching fellow, who takes it home, and if he doesn't lose it, passes it back with a check minus, a check, or a check plus 2 weeks after that. So the time between the moment the student actually did the problem and the time that they actually get the problem set back is 2 to 4 weeks. And all that they've gotten is, on the first page of a 15-page problem set, a check minus, or a check plus. Terrible, ridiculous. Here's the future, and it's already here. I can show you courses that have already gone down this path. I give you a problem, and in real time, you answer it right there electronically on the web page. And instantly, the web page tells you exactly whether you got it right or wrong, and then if you got it wrong, it helps you transition to the right answer. And so now you're getting real-time feedback. It's meaningful. You're actually learning rather than writing down a wrong answer and never realizing that it was wrong because you never bothered to figure out why you got a check minus 2.5 weeks later when you were busy with something else. The electronic world of education is going to be an extraordinary transformation for the better. That doesn't mean there are going to be no losers.
Follow up?
Yeah.
I'm thinking more about someone who needs to be induced to make a rational decision to pursue the education. Who's not at an institution of higher education setting, but who's in a remote place whose life could be improved dramatically if they got a BA online.
Yeah. I'll do it the same exact way. I'm going to say to that remote person, here's the course. It's basically for free. We're going to do all these cool problem set things. And then when it's time for the exams, because we have a grading issue, you're going to have to go to the capital city, 100 miles away. You'll have to do that once or twice and sit in a proctored space where we have real identification, and you'll get a grade. And it's going to have all the good incentive structures and the credibility that our courses do today. Now, is that as good as the education I'm giving my students in a Harvard classroom, back in May? No, it can't be because they're kind of isolated. But it's going to be shockingly good relative to the alternative previously, which was buying a 25-year-old out-of-date textbook and teaching themselves. Yes?
Relating to education, it always surprises me in Oklahoma and parents in choosing where their children go to pre-K through high school. There may be 2 schools in their neighborhood. One's a traditional school with an F grade. We grade our schools in Oklahoma. And then there's a charter school that might be a B or an A. And why you would keep sending your kid to the F when you can go to the A or B for free, both free.
Yeah, great. Well, let's exactly take that example and apply the ideas here. Do you think, open question, but I think I know the answer. Let's take that parent and let's say, Mr. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, it is now easy to decide where to send your kid. There's no complex enrollment process. There's no 500-page form to read. There's no set of meetings you have to go to all over the district. Here are 2 buttons. This button says standard school with a grade of F. This button says charter school with a grade of B.
This tells me you would hit the better school.
They'd hit the better school.
But
exactly.
Charter, you got to fill out all the forms. And
exactly.
By this date, then you're screwed.
Exactly. And we make it easy. And one of the crazy things is our society has long held the view that government programs, handouts, benefits should be held behind a wall of forms because we don't want the wrong people using those things. But of course, that wall of forms has an interesting selection mechanism, which is it ends up advantaging the people, probably overrepresented in this room, who are willing to spend hours and hours and hours through the paperwork to get to the right place. And it hurts the people who don't have the time or don't have the literacy even to understand all of those things. Charter school, everyone in this room knows what a charter school is. I bet if we ran a survey of American households, we'd find that half the population doesn't really know what a charter school is. So are we surprised that they don't go through the 75 documents and attend the 12 meetings and make the decisions and meet the deadline when they don't even know what a charter school is, let alone the fact that they're, in many places, much better than the public alternative? Of course, they're not always better, and we need to be careful about that. Yes?
So I'm interested in environmental policy. I have a
Yeah,
son
great.
who's getting a PhD in environmental ethics, and he's writing a dissertation on how do you write policy so that people will do the right thing. And so let's talk about recycling.
Yeah,
Okay?
great.
You get a bin.
Yeah.
So is that opting in? But then nobody knows what you're doing in your kitchen if you're throwing the plastic into another bag to take out to the right bin.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about recycling as an example.
Yeah, great. So recycling is a wonderful example. So the framework that I typically come to is the question, are people able to execute what they want to do in an easy way? So if I give them a recycling task, and it's really complicated, they've got to wash everything, they've got to sort everything, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a mess. And not only will they not do it, but they'll do it the wrong way. They won't attend. But if I give them a recycling task where, you know what, it's a little less efficient for the municipality because the waste is going to be accumulated in a bin that has mixed objects, and maybe I don't insist so much on washing everything, which is, by the way, another kind of environmental perplexity for me, because you use energy and water to wash things that are going to get... Of course, from the perspective of the recycler, it is better to have washed things coming in, but we need to know how much more follow-through do we get when we make the recycling easy for the family, and are we willing to accept slightly less well-sorted things and slightly dirtier things, and maybe we'll get a 20% improvement in recycling because now it's easy. So the way I would be thinking about it if I were thinking about behavioral economics and environmental policy and your son's educational research projects, I'd be thinking about how can we supercharge the success of recycling programs by making recycling less of a hassle, more easy, less complex, less of a chore.
And do you enter the moral, what's the right thing to do in that?
I'm an economist. So you know, joking aside, economists try to avoid conversations about morality because what we try to say is, look, you tell me what your goals are as a society. You tell me what society wants, what society's priorities are, what society is trying to achieve. And then I'm just an engineer. I'm a humble engineer. I'll tell you how to build a machine that as efficiently as possible delivers what you want. And I'm not going to try to get into a conversation with my students or with policymakers about morality because, you know what? A, I'm not well qualified to have that. I have opinions, of course, but they're no better than anyone else's. And we have other people who are experts in that, and we have people who are elected to worry about that, meaning our elected representatives. So I see my role as helping households, firms, and governments efficiently achieve their aims, but I don't try to dictate to them what their aim should be or what their ethics should be. Yes?
Do you imagine if we would have collected this data 30 years ago, 50 years ago, it would have been markedly different? And if so, what role does sort of cultural norms play in the data collection?
You know, I don't think it would be markedly different. I think there appears to be lots of cultural variation, but I think that has more to do with background characteristics of our society that are changing and not the fundamental psychology that's changing. Let me give you an example. So the US savings rate has gone through all sorts of ups and downs over the last 200 years. So has the Japanese savings rate. Is that because the fundamental cultural foundation of American society has changed, or the fundamental cultural foundation of Japanese society has changed? I think not so much. I think what mostly explains these variations is the state of the macroeconomy and whether the economy is growing rapidly, which tends to coincide with very high savings rates. Often the causality goes from high growth to high savings because people feel flush. They don't feel in any way financially constrained when their income is doubling every 10 years. So they can save a lot. I think that's a lot of what's happening in China now and what happened in Japan in the 60s and 70s. And so what looks like dire changes in the cultural identity of these different countries, I think, is really just changes in the underlying growth rate of the economies, creating what appears to be a change in the personality of the citizens. But it has more to do with basic economic mechanisms and very little to do with the psychology of the citizen. That's and we can talk more about that later. I'll give you more examples. Great, so it's 2:20. Why don't I take 4 questions and just state them very quickly and I'll answer them jointly. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So just very quick question and I'll give one answer to the whole group.
Is there 1 or 2 either books or comprehensive magazine articles or essays that you could recommend to us if we want to pursue behavioral economics?
Yeah. So the best book that there are 2 books that I would recommend to the general public to get their hands wet, and then a 3rd book that's just forthcoming right now. So The first book that you might want to read is a book by Richard Thaler called Nudge, which describes a lot of the issues that I've talked about today. Nudge, N-U-D-G-E. Another book, which is written by Danny Kahneman, is called Thinking Fast and Slow, which is about the psychology of decision making. Kahneman is spelled K-A-H-N-E-M-A-N. And then a third book that is forthcoming this fall is written by Eldar Shafir, who happens to be with us right now in the back row, and Sendhil Mullainathan, who is just on his way to the airport right now. And they have a forthcoming book about scarcity and how that affects the decisions of various populations that face scarcity, lower income households who have scarce money, and upper income households who have scarce time. I very much recommend that book to you. The title of the book, Eldar?
Scarcity, why having so little means so much.
Okay, the door opened up.
Scarcity, why having so little means so much.
Right. Okay, so there's 3 books for you. And if you read those 3, send me an email and I'll give you some more suggestions. That's a good start. I'm sorry, I'd answered the question. I said I would. Okay, so you know what? I'm feeling guilty. You all have schedules. I'm going to stick around and answer questions. I'll be here for a little while. Those who have questions, please join me at the front. Thank you.
Money is based on faith.
It's
so much
faith.
faith in belief. So much money is being printed.